Hey everybody, welcome back. We are in our texturing series of our Quonset hanger. Obviously it's not the Quonset hanger you see up on the screen right now, but we are at the point where we need to discuss something real quick. You know how I am with real quick. It could be 4 hours long. But we're all at the point where we need to basically step up our game in terms of our scenery design, scenery creation. And many of you are beginners, and I understand that. I am not an expert 100%, I can guarantee that. But we're all beginners. But anyway, for those that are just getting into scenery design, it's a good thing for us to start off knowing this right off the bat instead of having to learn it later, because it can affect your scenery creation down the line. We need to start talking about, in our texturing and our model building, planning ahead for what is known as levels of detail, or LoDs, or LoDs. Okay? We need to understand that. We need to learn it now so we're not swimming upstream later. Okay? So I'm going to show you what I mean by levels of detail and how to export your model into levels of detail, and what is important when you are thinking about texturing your buildings or just even creating your models. All right, so on the screen, you see this is the main terminal for Burke Lakefront Airport, Cleveland, Ohio. And I am working on version 3 of this airport. I'm basically totally redoing it to make it more efficient and more accurate. We have the main terminal, which is this area here. We have the tower, the ATC tower, and we have the operations area of the airport, and we also have the International Women's Air and Space Museum connected to it. These used to be passenger terminals at one time. All right. Now, if I am pulled up at a gate, let me get to the ramp side of the building. If I'm pulled up at a gate and my pilot is sitting in his aircraft, like right here, this particular building has a lot of glass curtains as walls. Okay? That means that you sitting in your aircraft can see inside certain portions of the building. So that's why I put objects and scenery inside of my terminals. Many people that use the flight simulator say, why do you creators use the inside of the terminals? Why do you do the inside of the terminals? Well, it's a matter of choice for many. They just want to have fun in creating their scenery. But at the same time, they don't think about the pilots and the taxing it is on their machines, on their computers. All right? We have to understand that from going forward in our scenery design. I do interiors of buildings when the pilot can see the interior from the aircraft. So, since this airport has a lot of glass walls, a lot of the scenery inside shows up. Okay? So I want to model that. However, I don't want all of that stuff to show up when the pilot is on final approach out here. Okay? So I need to create levels of detail. So I might have a pilot coming in for landing, okay? And he's coming in like this. Okay, and he's landing, and all right, he doesn't need to see the insides of the building, all right? So I have a level of detail for when the pilot is out here or 30,000 feet in the air or whatever it is. Then as he gets closer in the simulator, when maybe he's like right here, he sees a little bit more detail on the building, but he may not still be able to see like furniture and stuff there, I'll have another level of detail. Then when he's taxiing in, if I can do this, okay? So if he's taxiing in and then he pulls up at the building, then I might want scenery to show up, okay, inside the building, the highest level. And then many times a pilot, a simmer, will go into drone mode and they'll go inside the building, okay? Some do, not everybody, but some do, okay? But they might want to explore the inside of the building. So they'll go into drone mode and they'll go into the building. Let me get something to focus on here. Let me select something here. There we go. Now I can get inside the building in Blender. All right. But they can go inside the building and they can walk around and they can see any Easter eggs you guys have hidden inside of your scenery. Okay. So like, for instance, I have an under construction sign because I'm going to publish this airport without doing a lot of the scenery back here in this version. So I just let them know that this part of my airport is under construction. But I have areas inside the terminal that I'm doing detail to, okay? But we don't want all those details to show up when the pilot is on approach or even taxiing off of the runway, okay? We only want this stuff to show up when he's right up against the building or he gets in drone mode and goes into the building, all right? So that's where levels of detail comes into play. If you notice this model, I have set up 3 collections, X00, X01, X02. Those are the levels of detail for the simulator. And in each one of these is a copy of the one above with some exceptions. Okay, so here's the listing of objects that are in 000. There's like, how many? There's like, I think like, let me click on it here. How many objects? There's 587 objects in this one collection. Okay, and that's all the furniture, all the desks, computers, whatever I've put into the high detail. I also have one that's X01, which is pretty much a copy of 00, except I've deleted a whole bunch of stuff. Okay? I've deleted objects and I've deleted textures and I've replaced them with lower res type of textures. Okay. Then I also have an X02, which is a copy of 01 with many more deletes, okay, and textures, less textures. So I've taken each model and I've reduced the number of vertices and polygons in each model, and I've reduced the number of textures being used. This is what you need to know for levels of detail. And by what you want to do is reduce the number of vertices and polygons and textures by 50% for each level of detail. How do you know that? All right, so if I select detail X00, my highest level, I have 73,000 vertices. I have 63,000 faces. Okay? If I go to X01, I have 36,000 vertices. So I've reduced them more than 50%. And the same with faces. Okay? And objects, there's only 375 in this one. The textures I have reduced by changing them from PBR textures to just vertex colors or just native Blender colors. All right, they're not PNG files and different layers of roughness and metallic and all that kind of stuff. They're just one solid color that's close to the color of the texture. All right. So I removed PBR textures in the next level. All right. Then we go into our lowest level of detail, and I've really reduced. I'm down to 13,000 vertices and 12,000 polygons or faces, and I only have 243 objects. All right. But again, I've reduced the number of vertices and polygons, and I've reduced the number of textures again. Okay. So this particular level of detail, my highest level of detail, I have probably 100 textures. In this particular model, the lowest detail, which the pilot's going to see from about here on out, okay, I only have 7 textures in this particular model now. The roof, the walls, the brick, the windows, okay? So I've reduced them dramatically. So that's what you need to understand as a beginning creator, is you need to start thinking ahead to levels of detail, because someday as this simulator evolves, this will be required that you have to have levels of detail. Now, if you just have like a simple looking barn with one PBR texture and it only has maybe 50 vertexes and polygons, you'll never have to use levels of detail, because once that zooms out, I mean, it's below the minimums for levels of detail anyway, okay? I mean, there's some times when you don't have to do levels of details, but if you guys are doing these big international airports and you're doing interiors of the terminals and stuff like that, you got to think levels of detail. All right. Now, what does levels of detail mean and how is it measured? Well, let's open up the XML for this particular one. So in the folder for the model lib for main terminal, when you export it, it creates a model for each one of the levels of detail. So 00 is the highest and 02 is the lowest detail. You get a GLTF for each one of those and a bin for each one of those. Then you get a master XML, which is going to be the name of the model that you're exporting out to. And inside this XML is some information that you need to know. Inside that XML, we'll open this one up in Note++. You get the GUID, which is the unique identifying number, alphanumeric number for that object. Okay? This tells the sim what model's going where. Then you get a tag, LoDs, and then you have in that tag the different levels of detail model. Then next to it, you're going to see a min size. In the sim, or not in the sim, yeah, in the sim, when you add an object, if you notice every time that you add an object, there's this white wireframe box around it, okay? That is called the bounding box of the object. It's usually bigger than the object itself. It's the geographic extent. If you carried out all axes how much space that object takes in memory. Okay? The height of that bounding box is measured against the screen that the sim is in. Okay? So if I'm looking at this monitor here, this screen that I have, from the bottom of the monitor to the top is 100%. Half of that's 50. Quarters 25. You get the picture? But it's the height. Okay? So if my bounding box, in this example for this main terminal, if my bounding box for this model takes up 100% of the screen, the height of that bounding box takes up 100% of the screen, show that model. Does that make sense? For the next lowest level of detail, I have it set for 50%. So if the height of that bounding box is 50% to 99%, it's going to show this model. Anything below 50 is going to show the low-res model. Okay? Does that make sense? That's how levels of detail are measured on your screen. We're going to go into the sim, hopefully, if my machine doesn't freeze up. I know my video of me here in this corner, I know it will freeze up when I go into the sim, but we'll worry about that later. You guys don't need to see me, my ugly mug anyway. So the XML determines inside the XML, you set these sizes of a percent that of the screen height that you want that model to show up. So in my example, when that terminal, the bounding box of the terminal, fills up my screen, show that detailed model. When my bounding box of my terminal only takes up 50% of the screen, show the next level. Okay? And then anything smaller than 50%, just use my low-res model. Okay? That's how levels of detail work. Now, in this example, I only have 3 levels of detail. 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2. You can have more than this. Okay? The sim recommends 4. Okay? But depending on your model. So how do you get all this? All right, let's go through the export, and you're going to see a caveat to the export. Depending on how your export performs, there might be a bug in it, and I'm going to show you how to take care of that bug. All right, so let's pretend we're going to export this model. I'm not going to actually hit export because I already have it exported. All right, so let's go into Blender. And just like any other object that you've ever exported out to the sim, you turn on the collection that you want to export, and you hit A to select everything. So everything inside each of these collections is selected. All right, so I got 0, 1. Let's turn these on. All right, so I have all of these collections that you start with the name X, 0, 0, and then the next lowest detail is 0, 1, next lowest is 0, 2. When you have them in this format, you're ready to export levels of detail. So hit A, select everything. You can double check inside, make sure everything is selected. Then you come over to File, and you go to Export, and export GLTF2 for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and you get the export dialog. Okay? Migrate into your package sources for your model, in this case, main term. Now, for the first time that I create this, I give it the same name, main terminal, just like we always export. I hit enter. All right. Then I type in my path for my textures, I click remember so I don't have to keep typing this stuff in. I go to Msfs and I click batch export LoDs, generate XML. My XML name is the same as my model name, and I generate a GUID, just like we always do, except what's different for levels of detail is you checkbox the batch export. Then your includes are selected, your transform, and your geometry is selected as normal. Okay? Don't do tangents because Msfs can't handle tangents. Then you click export your model. All right, I'm going to cancel instead of hit that. Then you'll get your screen that I showed before in your model directory of your model lib. You'll get the main terminal XML in this case, and you'll get your levels of detail, GLTF, and bin files. All right. Now, if I was to build it the first time after I did this, I would go out to my main folder, grab my main project XML, and I would right-click and drag that onto the fspackagetool.exe that I have in this folder. I would just right-click, drag, and drop that XML on that, and it will build my project. Okay? Now, since my executable for the export has some kind of bug in it, it had a failure. It would not compile LOD01. And if it doesn't build 01, it will not build 02. So there was some kind of bug. So how do I take care of that bug? Well, that's easy. So create it like this the first time. The second time, you're only going to turn on one of these at a time. So I had them all turned on before. Now I'm going to turn off 00 and 02. And I'm only going to work with 01. So I activate that one, hit A to select everything, go to File, Export, open up the dialog, just like we did before. Go into the model lib directory for that object, and you're only going to concentrate on LOD01. So down here, you are going to type in main terminal, or the name of your model, underscore LOD 01. Okay, hit enter. Make sure the path for the texture is the same. Come to Msfs and uncheck batch, uncheck generate XML. Okay, and then export your model. Okay. Now, what's helpful before you do this step is the first time it created that main terminal.xml. Before you do this next step, just change the name of that main terminal.xml to something else. Okay, maybe X main terminal.xml. All right, and just keep it in the folder for now. After you come into LOD01 and export only that without creating the export LODs or the generate XML, okay, you should only get a GLTF and a bin for LOD01. Okay, now you're done with that one. Now repeat the process for LOD2. So I'm going to hit cancel here. Let's pretend I hit export. You're going to turn off 01 and you're going to turn on 02. And you're going to select everything with A. You're going to go to File. You're going to go to Export, Msfs. You're going to open up the dialog, and then you're going to go into your package sources. Now, I didn't save it. That's why I have to redo this part. Okay, you're going to go into main terminal again, and you're only going to concentrate now on LOD2. So down here, you're going to type in main terminal, or whatever the name of your model is. Terminal underscore LOD02. Hit enter. Fill in this part, and then uncheck this stuff again, the export LOD and the XML, and then export that out, and you'll get a GLTF for LOD02. Okay, so you've built the first time. I mean, you exported the first time, and it created all three of them. Okay, and the main terminal.xml. Then you rename the main terminal.xml to maybe x main terminal.xml. And then you went back into Blender, turned off 00 and 02, and then exported only LOD01 without any XML creation or anything like that, and created the GLTF in the bin. Same with 2. So you repeated the process, except it was 02. The next step of what you do is you go back into that folder. Go into the model lib, go into main terminal, or whatever your model is, and rename the x main terminal.xml back to main terminal.xml. With me? I know it's a little confusing, but it does work. If you have a bug in your build failed, this will take care of it. Okay? Next step is you need to double check that the GUID for the model matches the GUID that's in your scenery if you've created this before, okay? And it has a different GUID. So open up the main terminal XML in Notepad++. Copy the GUID, Control-C that, okay? And then go into the package sources scenery director and open your scene XML. Do a search for the model that you're creating. In our case, it was main terminal. And make sure that the GUID after name equals matches the one that's in the terminal XML. If it's different, just copy the one that's in the terminal XML into the scenery XML. All right, and then save. And then rebuild your project. Grab your project XML and right-click and drag and drop that onto the fspackagetool.exe to build the project. You should not have any fails anymore. Okay, now what does this look like in the sim? All right, so my picture is going to disappear before I go into the sim, okay, because it's going to freeze up anyway. So I will be back as soon as I am in the simulator. Please hold. Okay, we're back in the sim. Obviously I'm gone, which is probably good for you. All right, so we're in the sim. I've loaded the project into the scenery editor, and we have our terminal, okay? And if I was a pilot and I wanted to explore the interior, I would go into drone mode, and I can go into the terminal and I can have a look around, okay? Got all my scenery, all types of stuff. Now, the lag is going to be terrible with the simulator running and OBS running at the same time. I apologize for that, but I don't have any control on that. Okay, but anyway, the inside of the terminal is the detail that I put in my model. Okay, so let's go out, sit at the gate. Now, I don't have like ground textures redone yet, but that comes later. but we're talking about levels of detail. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate up a little bit. I'm going to zoom out. Okay. And you can really tell at night. So I'm going to change the weather, the time of day, so all the lights are on. Okay. So if I'm sitting at the gate, I can see inside the building at night because of the interior lighting that's going on. All right. Some realistic look to it. Okay. But watch what happens with the levels of detail. Now I'm not going to turn the indicators on yet, but I'll show you that here in a second. So let's zoom out and watch the lighting and the windows. So we'll zoom out. Keep zooming out. Yep, there you go, right there. See how the windows changed? There's less light. Okay. And see, when I move in just a little bit, those lights come on. That telling me that this is a different model than this one. Okay. So here we have our highest level model with the interior as we get closer. And then as I move out, detail is lost for when this particular terminal is seen from a distance. Okay, now let's let's go into options and turn on our debug model LoDs, levels of detail. Now you're going to see a whole bunch of numbers because I got a whole bunch of objects in the model. Okay, that's why you see so many funky numbers. Each object that's in this scenery has a level of detail. All right, but we're not talking about all this other stuff. I want you to concentrate on this one right here, this big one. Right now, the bounding box for this model is 181% of the screen. Okay, or that's where I'm at. All right, as I zoom out, that number changes. Now the color changed too. This is 124. This is 105. Now remember that threshold that I put in there was 100. So as soon as I get below 100, this model changes. Bam. See how the lights went out? And now you just have a basic shape of the model. Okay. And this model will stay there until this number reaches less than 50, because that was the next setting. So there's 60, there's 55, there's 52, and there's 42. And it did, I know it's hard to see. But that is the third less. Let me move all these. Let me get rid of all these numbers here. Okay, this is the lowest detailed model, and then boom, it goes into a higher detail model right there. I saw a little change. Look at right here. See that little white spot right there? It will disappear in the next one. Okay, so this is the lowest level, and then as I get closer, and if that reaches 100%, all these lights come on and the interiors of the buildings are there. So what is determining that is the bounding box of this particular model. I'm going to turn the bounding boxes on. I'm going to go to options, go to debug model LoDs. Now you get all those ugly numbers again, but I'm going to turn on bounding sphere. This blue sphere is the sphere for the main terminal. This right here is what is going to determine when that model shows up in the sim. So right now, that blue sphere, if you look right here really close, it's 79.1% of the screen. Okay, as I move in, there's 83%. there's 92%, there's 101%. So this blue sphere around that model, the size of that sphere is 101.97% of the height of my screen. That's why that model shows up at that scale. So that's what the min size in the main terminal.xml is. It's the size of this blue sphere in relationship to the size of the screen. Okay, so many objects, every object in there has a sphere, has a bounding sphere. Okay, so some of these trees, these orange ones, and this, I don't know what they are. I don't I don't have them all memorized, but anyway, okay, here is Signature Flight Services. That's their bounding spheres for each one of those models. Okay, so the min size in your level of detail model XML is the size, the ratio, or how much percentage of the screen this bounding sphere is taking up. Okay, so you can go in and use, now obviously I have a whole bunch of stuff that makes it really confusing to look at, but you can turn on the LoD debugger and fine tune when you want a model to show up by looking at those numbers that we were looking at, those percentage numbers. All right, maybe I want a certain model to show up at 125 or at 161, okay, by zooming in, zooming out, and all that kind of stuff. All right, so that's the basics of levels of detail, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because it's important in the future. Okay, I'm going to get out of the sim to close up this discussion, and because anytime I'm in the sim, it makes the recording file larger. So I will be right back as soon as I'm out of the sim. Okay, we're out of the sim. So you saw what level of detail does. Okay, it's a percentage of screen size for the bounding box of the model. All right, I showed you how to export levels of detail. I showed you how to take care of, if you've built after your initial export of your levels of details, how to fix if your build fails. Why am I bringing this up in the texturing part or the texturing series? I want you guys to start thinking like a professional would in using levels of details for your models. Now, like I said before, if you're just doing a simple barn or something like that, just has 4 walls, a roof, and something general, levels of detail aren't really all that important because the model is so small. But if you're doing highly detailed interiors and things like that, then levels of detail is necessary so you don't tax the computer pilot's computer when they're on approach. All right, so why is this in the texturing series? Also is when we start getting back into our Quonset, we're going to be thinking in the terms of levels of detail. We're going to be thinking in the levels of detail from now on forward. All right, so you guys needed to have an understanding of LoDs now, and it's good to know it when you're just getting into scenery creation, so you don't really look like an amateur. And I don't mean like I'm some professional designer, because I'm not. I do this for free, for not only my enjoyment, but for you guys to have a great hobby and all that kind of stuff. But I want to feel like a professional. You know what I'm saying? I want to take some pride in what I'm doing and give people good quality, good performance. And I'm doing my best to train myself to do that. I'm not a really organized person, but I want to share this information ahead for you guys to be better. Hey, if this video was helpful or confusing, leave me a comment. Let's start a discussion. I know a lot of you great designers out there have better ways of doing things. Go ahead and put those in the comments. Give us your feedback. I just want you guys to do things correctly, and as the simulator evolves, there's going to be a time when this is actually required, that you have levels of details for your models. Okay, so unlike me, where I'm going back to every one of my scenery files and I'm redesigning things and adding in levels of detail, if you're just starting out, I don't want you to have to go back and redo your stuff. I want you to be able to do your stuff right the first time. Okay? I've been at this little over, well, almost 2 years now, and it's time for me to start acting like a professional, right? Anyway, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bells for upcoming videos. The texturing series continues. If you feel inclined, please support me by buying me just a simple cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/myphysicalworld. I hope this is helpful. Share it. Tell your friends about it. I'm getting close to 1,000 subscriptions, so I'm a little less than 200, but I thank you all. You guys are great. I have some great supporters that are here every single video, and they're commenting and they're sending me messages and stuff, and we're just having a good time, and I'm here for you guys, and I'm really glad, and I thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this boring old man do some stuff. All right, so I will see you guys on the next video, and we will see you later.